In a world filled with challenges and opportunities, it's not just about having big dreams, it's about having the right approach to turn those dreams into reality. Whether you're navigating the competitive landscape of business or seeking personal growth, it's all about the approach.
Welcome back, everybody, for the latest episode of The Approach. Just so that you understand the premise of where the show comes from, going back to my days in the military, working in military intelligence, I was an interrogator working in counterintelligence, and everything that was about our job was about the approach. It allowed us to have success or failure in that. My guest today, I'm really excited. His name is Drew Forsberg. He's originally from Montauk, New York, and he was inspired by the events of 9/11 to enlist in the military, serving over 22 years as a Navy SEAL before retiring as a Chief Warrant Officer. Early in his military career, he became a born-again Christian and attributes his success to the principles of servant leadership, drawing inspiration from biblical warriors and personal lessons learned from both exceptional and flawed leaders within the SEAL teams. Drew's leadership journey is enriched by executive education from prestigious institutions. His experience leading church ministries across San Diego and Hawaii. In addition to speaking engagements, Drew is involved in Beyond the Brotherhood, an organization dedicated to supporting Navy SEALs as they transition from military to civilian life. His work focuses on mentorship, leadership development, and equipping veterans with the tools needed to thrive beyond their service, reflecting his commitment to the SEAL community. Drew's speaking topics include biblical warriorship, leading through influence, and cultivating positive culture. His unique blend of military precision, spiritual insight, and leadership experience come alive. His talks are more than motivational. They are a call to action, challenging audiences to lead with purpose, integrity, and faith. Drew has a passion for empowering others, drawing from a lifetime of lessons on the front lines and in the pulpit. He engages audiences with a dynamic style that blends real-world anecdotes, biblical truths, and actionable leadership strategies. So whether he's speaking in corporate teams, church congregations, or at conferences, his message resonates deeply, inspiring listeners to step into their God-given potential. So without further ado, let's welcome Drew Forsberg.
Thanks.
Welcome to the show. So I read your bio and we talk about that, but let's give the audience a overall picture of where Drew started to the picture they have based on your bio.
Yeah. So you read Montauk, New York. It's a very small town out on the east end of Long Island. No stoplights. A lot of people think of Long Island and think of the city. But if you continue to go east and keep going east, out past the Hamptons and everything else, eventually that train stops. And it stops in a town with mostly fishermen and a couple of restaurants that open about 4 months out of the year, when all those city people come out and spend their summer vacations. And then the rest of the locals, we just forge that money away so that we can make the rest of the 8 months last.
Yeah.
So that's how I grew up. My dad was a commercial fisherman. If you watch The Perfect Storm with George Clooney and going out and catching swordfish, my dad got to do that for quite a time.
Wow.
And he was even brought up in a fishing family. My great-grandfather helped dig the Holland Tunnel and lost a couple fingers in that. He got a severance check, bought a fishing boat, started catching fish, and was approached one day by a guy who said, "Hey, you looked like pretty good at this. Can you take me out fishing?" And he was like, "Well, how many rods?" Just a hand line. He was like, "I'll bring the rods." So the guy brought the rods, went out fishing, had a good day's catch. When the guy left, he said, "Keep the rods." That was Penn, who owns Penn Reels and Rods. Mm-hmm. My great-grandfather got his start, came home and said, "I think I can make a living at this." And then picked up the whole family and moved all the way out to Montauk, where my grandfather was raised. My grandfather really took that business to another level and kind of owned the dock area with a fleet of boats. So ever since I could walk and crawl, I was on boats, both my grandfather's boats for the party boat fishing. And then at 8, I went out for 10 days where I couldn't see land, out with my dad, commercial fishing for tile fish in the wintertime. I grew up on boats a lot. The Navy was just a matter of fate for me.
No.
In my teenage years, I got addicted to surfing. It sounds odd as a surfer from New York, but for the East Coast, we get decent waves out there in Montauk. And since I was not an athlete by any means, I could not throw a ball or catch one to save my life. I looked at surfing as a way to kind of do something different that no one else was doing, and I could embarrass myself without anybody watching. That kind of became my new life's passion, which really drove me through my high school years. It drove me to get a restaurant job so I didn't have to spend as much time on the boats and I could surf more. Graduate high school early. I wasn't interested in doing all these advanced college placement classes to go to some state university in New York. I wanted out and surf more. So I went to California. After 2 years of community college in California, 9/11 happened. And I decided to stop being the burnout surfer that I was and wanted to go serve my country. So drove up to the recruiter's office a week after 9/11, told him I saw a Charlie Sheen movie when I was 9. Thought that was cool. The Navy SEALs, could I do anything like that? My recruiter was very straightforward and honest with me. And he was like, yes, I will get you a contract. You need to start running. You need to start getting ready. And how much time do you need? So I took 6 months, got myself in good shape, ran a lot, swam a lot, did a lot of push-ups, went to boot camp, SEAL training, and off to the West Coast SEAL teams for the rest of my career. Yeah. Finally, at the tail end, at the 19-year mark, I had become a warrant officer, and I realized we needed to do a little bit of diversity, and it felt like God was pulling me and my wife's heartstrings to go to Hawaii. I asked around, and they were like, we need a warrant officer 3 in April 2019 or 2021. Please, yes, get here. So I moved to Hawaii at the 19-year mark. 6 months later, the vaccine mandate came out, and I told the Navy to buzz off. I wasn't going to do it. So I had to risk everything with that move, but came out on top. I was able to join that lawsuit where me and about another 24 Navy SEALs sued the Navy for unlawful orders that they were executing. We won, and I won a good 2.5 years extra in the Navy to plan my exit. It was nice because I didn't owe the Navy anything. If they were willing to put me in the trash can, then I was only going to be doing what was absolutely necessary and not a minute more. I could start looking at, all right, what are all these transition programs out there for service members and take advantage of as much as I could. Now we're just living the dream here in Hawaii, homesteading in my little tiny normal residential yard. Got a couple of chickens. My kids are homeschooled, and we're at the beach by 2:00 on a weekday so the kids can get some surfing in.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome story. And you don't think about somebody from the East Coast, especially New York, like you said, and somebody that's big into surfing from that area. It's just, not normal. Most of the time you think about surfing, you think about Florida, East Coast of Florida, right. Southern California. I was stationed in Monterey for a while when I was going through language school. They told us, don't go out in the water. It has the highest concentration of great white sharks than anywhere along the Pacific coast. So you didn't go out in the water.
I risked it. I'm a diehard. I went for a year at Santa Cruz Community College and spent a lot of time out there.
Yeah. I've been to Santa Cruz. They still have the boardwalk, Coney Island up there. They also had the mascot, the banana slugs.
Banana slugs, that's true.
If you would share parts of your journey, you said you were a burned out surfer before you joined the military. What was your perception of leadership at that point? Did you have a concept?
I hadn't really thought about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in restaurants as the busboy usually, or the food runner. So I was usually working for a waitress, and that was my boss. I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed little busboy. Yeah. Before that, growing up on the fishing boats and working before working papers were around for me, because it was a family business, I also realized, all right, there's mates that are much more senior than I, and the captains of the boat, they're the final say when you're out at sea. So I'm just going to listen and do whatever they tell me. My only experience with leadership is you obey and do what needs to get done. You can ask questions, but at the end of the day, you're the lowest totem pole. I didn't really think much about, if Captain Richie was running the trip, Vice Captain Davey, what was their style of not only leading or catching fish, but also how they manage the crew. I took some notes, mental notes as 12 and 13 years old, but I didn't really give it too much thought until military.
Yeah. Do you remember exactly what you were doing when 9/11 happened?
Yeah, we were going surfing.
9/11
was a really epic day out there in Long Island. Yeah. And our family owns quite a few boats that go out party boat fishing. We also own a ferry out to one of the nearby islands. And me, my brother, and my cousin. My brother's just a year younger than me, so we were both in college age. My cousin was at high school age. And we woke up early. We surfed in Montauk. And the family ferry was leaving at 11 a.m. out to a decent island where there's some good private little surf breaks.
Yeah.
And I was like, we need to skip you out of school. We're going to hide you underneath my sweatshirt. We're going to smuggle you onto the family ferry, and we're going surfing. So the three of us did that. And on the ferry ride out, we got notified about the two towers getting hit. Yeah. And everyone rushed around this one little antenna, rabbit ear antenna TV, and watched on our trip over to this island. We watched the towers fall.
Yeah.
So it was surreal for me, because then I get out to this island and we're surfing spots, and some of the guys that I saw out in the lineup that I was surfing with, I'm like, hey, did you hear what happened to them? They're like, no. They had no idea. We had no idea how many people were killed. We did walk the planes making U-turns. Everyone was returning. So it's surreal. I knew that life was about to change. I was going to be called to some new purpose. I wasn't going to go back to college and continue studying and being a burnout surfer.
Yeah. Could you see any smoke from where you were in relation to New York City?
No, it's a pretty long island. It takes about 3 hours to get from New York City to Montauk. The only evidence that we saw were planes making U-turns above us.
Yeah. Okay. Share your first impressions when you got to Buds. What was running through your head and what got you through?
I guess I had this kind of attitude where I never really thought I deserved to be there. I wasn't an athlete. I didn't think I'd ever make it. Even though I wasn't a Christian, it seemed like God was aligning things for me prior to me even getting to Buds. Yeah. So for instance, on my way to the recruiter's office, I'm crying out to God, like, what am I even doing? I can't believe I'm actually driving to the recruiter's office. And I came behind a truck with this bumper sticker that says Protect Freedom, U.S. Navy. And it's not a military town. That was weird as I finished my sentence to see this bumper sticker in traffic.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, when I'm like, I can't believe I signed all these papers and I'm actually committed to going into the Navy. I don't even know what the SEAL teams are really about. I'm sitting at my cousin's house and it was just me, and I turned on the TV and there was a 20-minute infomercial about the Navy SEAL teams. I've never seen it before. I've never seen it since. And I just sat there and was like, oh my goodness, that was another answer to my question that I asked to someone upstairs.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, I don't even know how to get ready. I don't even know what this is about. 2 weeks after that, my dad, who was managing a construction company, got a phone call by a guy who said, hey, my name is so-and-so. I'm looking for directions to your place so that I can support the Navy SEAL screening test. My dad's like, you've got the wrong number, buddy. This is a construction company. But my son was very interested in the SEAL teams. What are you talking about here? What's this test? And he was like, oh, come up here and this is where you got to go. And he'll at least be able to watch and see what he's got to get trained for. So I went and did that using the numbers. This is how far I need to swim. This is how fast I need to do it. How many push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups, and a run that I need to actually do and actually get ready for. So God lined these things up within the first month of me saying, I want to join the military. I was like, all right, Lord, if I'm going to make this through, you're going to have to show me. Once I got to Buds, it was definitely surreal. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I've watched a couple of the shows. I've read a couple of the books. A couple of the guys that I'm with have been here before. I'm just going to glean as many lessons as I can and do the absolute best that I can. And if I don't make it, I don't really care. It's just, I'm going to give it forth my best effort.
Yeah. If Charlie Sheen could do it, so can you. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I've had a couple of other guys from the teams that have been on here. They shared parts of their journey and then some of the stuff that they went through, talking about how just because you're done with Buzz doesn't mean you're done. You still go through additional training. Even when you're assigned to a team, you're not necessarily operational until you go through additional training there. How much training do you go through before you're considered a team guy?
From boot camp to the team, through the first time without any setbacks by some miracle. And that still took 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And then you're at your team for typically 1.5 years more. And then you can deploy for 6 months. You're a new guy for 1.5 years until that deployment. Now you're at the 3.5 year mark. You're finally a bona fide team guy. You're no longer a new guy. I guess you're bona fide as soon as you get to the team, but everyone's looking at you. I guess we'll see what it takes. How's he going to fare out this next 1.5 years?
Yeah.
Stay up to speed when you really earn your stripe. You finish your first deployment. After that, you are no longer a new guy. Now you are a one cruise wonder, a one pump chump, whatever the moniker they throw out there. It's usually when guys are the most arrogant. Now I got some new guys to boss around.
Yeah.
But that's also another dose of humility, because you're also like, yeah, I've only done one. If you get past 2, you really want a third pump. But by then, the team's like, hey, somebody has been training you for the 3 years. And those guys need to come back to a team. And we need you to go out and fill those guys and start training others. So typically you'll get 2 pumps minimum at a team. A lot of times you don't get more than that because training commands need guys too.
Yeah.
So you're lucky if you stick around for a third or fourth.
You've talked about military side and the leadership that you learned and the good and bad things that went along with it. You progressed into more of the faith-based stuff and combined them together. So talk about what you learned out of the military side, good, bad, or otherwise, before you got to that transition.
One of the big things that I learned was regarding the officers and enlisted. Officers deal with concepts, enlisted men deal with details. There's a great epiphany that I learned on one of my deployments. There was this Australian SAS guy who said that, and I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense about the division. And the more I thought about it and reflected on it, the junior of an enlisted guy that you are, the more intricate of the details you are. If you're in charge of the radio department, exactly which serial number is going to which person in the platoon, you're down to those kinds of details because who needs what and which cable they're going to use and all of these things. And then as you move up to the department head level, you're like, okay, how many boxes we got, how many radios we got, and you're checking all down. The junior guy is putting in the crypto and making sure that everybody's stuff is cleaned and working and charged. Then when you move up to what's called the LPO, the senior E6 in charge of, we call the E6 mafia, because everybody is an E6 by then. So you're the senior E6 managing all different department heads, but you're still down in the details and you can keep track of, oh, we're supposed to have 6 boats and only 5 are working because of such and such. Also, comms has got this kind of issue and they're not going to get these next 2 radios until Friday. So you're managing all these little things. The officers should be thinking up and out, how's our relationship with the commanding officer? How's our relationship with the training detachment? What are we got going on in the next 6 months as we look to do some squadron integration training? And what happens for deployment afterwards? If they're worried about how many radios we got, they're in the wrong mindset. That was a big thing for me, understanding that difference between what enlisted men need to be concerned with and what officers need to deal with. As you go up the ranks, the bigger concepts that you're dealing with and the bigger details that you're dealing with vice the small ones as the most junior level.
Yeah. So would you describe, so if you have somebody that's up higher the chain and they're worried about the stuff that's going on down on the, level 1 details, do you feel like that's where we're crossing the line into micromanagement or just a lack of focus of where they should be, or what's your take on that?
Bingo. That's exactly where micromanagement can come in. Now, if the junior guy isn't doing his job and not feeding the information up, you can't blame the chief for wanting to get into those details.
Yeah.
I can't really fault someone for that. And so this is like that balance of, okay, what is micromanagement and making sure that everything gets done appropriately.
Yeah. There's a fine line. If an incident forces the detail, then to me, you've got to figure out where that breakdown was as to why that happened so that you don't have to do that again versus chronically being in that either because you don't trust the people below you or because you had one that you don't trust that it won't happen again.
I had one experience that was really poor with an officer. We had taken the DISC test, the DISC. Have you seen that before? We did this platoon leaders course. I was the chief. He was the officer. And as it gave us our feedback, as far as who's high in DIS and C, my graph was almost identical to his. His was just a more extreme version of mine. So I'm thinking, I don't know if this is going to work well. A lot of the guys, when they briefed us, they were like, it is best if someone's high in D and I, that the other is high in S and C, and you can complement each other and work as a team. Him and I are both high C and D. I'm a checklist guy, very detail oriented. I'm making decisions and I'm sticking with them. That's my personality. And I know my world is down into the details and managing all the guys.
Yeah.
And it was easy for him to look at what I was doing and want to do the same, his more extreme version. So that became a hot button issue for me, really understanding what does micromanaging look like. And I know you had a guest that talked about commander's intent. So I'll give a silly example. Hey, Drew, I would like an LPO, a department head, tasked with cleaning our joint operations center every day. The coffee mess straightened up and the trash can. And why? Because we're in borrowed space. And so it's like a good, respectful thing to make sure that the whole place is squared away and they're not taxing their system. And I was like, yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So I put one of my most junior guys who didn't have any other responsibilities. He'd just come onto the platoon from a different unit. He didn't have much. I was like, hey, you're the Jock LPO. You don't have to do this by yourself, but these are things that need to get done. The next day, he's out there getting it all done. He showed up early. The place is clean, immaculate. My officer in charge comes in and he's like, hey, I saw so-and-so doing this LPO jock cleaning all by himself this morning. I'm like, yeah, that wasn't my intent. I wanted everybody to do it. I'm like, your intent is to have it clean. It's clean. Regardless of if it looks how you want it, be happy your intent was met and move on.
Yeah.
He was so mad. I didn't make it look how he wanted. I was like, if you want me, I can tell you, Garrett had to deal with radios. Mike was dealing with trucks and then dealing with other things. So the last guy, the jock, had nothing else going on. It's not my intent that he does it by himself. Okay. I understand. Other guys will help out eventually, but for crying out loud, if he does it by himself and it's done, it's really a non-issue. Stop worrying about this and worry about what our next mission is going to be, our partnership with our senior force and the commanding officer 2,000 miles away. I'll make sure the jock is clean. Yeah. This was a hot button item for me, like, to understand micromanagement. I reflected on it. I was like, you know what? I think I could do this to my wife. I let her run the house, but sometimes I come in and I'm like, that's not what I thought it was going to look like.
Yeah.
She taught me how to like back off. Like, hey, I'm the commander of this house, not the chief. She is. Yeah. I put out my intent. She meets it, and I should just be happy. Yeah. It helped me grow as a husband through that difficult trial time.
Yeah. My wife and I went through something similar when we, first got married. She hated the way I loaded the dishwasher. It came down to a conversation. The goal was to get the dishes clean. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter how it's loaded so long as they get clean. But this is what I did say. If you prefer it this way, I'll hand it over to you to allow you and let you load it the way that you want it, if that's going to make you happy. If it's not, then let me load it the way I want to load it and leave me be. But sometimes we get so focused on the how rather than the what.
Yes. And I think that's, as leaders, as far as trusting your guys to get it done, like, you need to have a couple of like key elements that you need to see accomplished. But if it doesn't look like how you thought it was going to look like, but they did accomplish those key things that you gave them, then you succeeded as a leader and they succeeded as doing their job. Yeah. Otherwise, if you micromanage every little thing and come in and say, well, that's not the way I would have done it, and their buy-in goes away. They don't care anymore because nothing satisfies you.
Yeah. It's all about approach. You can say, hey, awesome job. I'm glad you got this done. Ask questions. How did you accomplish it? Do a little after action review, compare notes, share. When I've done it before, I did it this way and you guys did it this way, but that's awesome. You both get the information out there and hopefully learn from each other. It's all about the approach you take when you're guiding people, and you should always be looking for opportunities to be able to grow and do it without being condescending or trying to tear somebody down in the process.
Absolutely. And I remember one of our great leaders, Jocko Willink. He was in charge of the training detachment. He's pretty well known now. What was so great about him was he would watch a plan unfold, and all the lower worker bees were assigned, okay, you plan the mission. You guys who have done one pump, you will start planning how you're going to execute this mission. Yeah. And then some more senior guys would come in and they fill in details that junior guys hadn't thought of yet. And that was how Jocko put out, that's the perfect answer, because every time that next senior person comes in, they're not stuck down at nose level looking at all the details. So when they come in, they have a fresh perspective, ask a couple of questions, and they look like the tactical genius. What are we doing for a blocking position? Is it really that smart? Maybe the junior guys would have thought of it. As long as you as the chief back yourself out and then come in when everybody else is done, and you can think that way, you won't get lost in all these details. You can get that bigger perspective. And the higher up the chain you go, the bigger perspective you need. When you come in fresh like that, then it's way better. It's way better executed because the guys down at the lower level, they already thought this through. They already have buy-in. And then when you come in and add a couple of things, ask a couple of questions, everyone is now excited and understand from the details to the bigger picture.
Yeah. I've seen instances like that in the military, business world, and in corporations. You have somebody new that comes in, already fixed in their mind what they want, instead of seeing what's working and not trying to fix something that's not broke. They come in and scrap everything and then wonder why everything's falling apart.
That happens a lot. In the military, you get about 2 to 3 years in the same position.
Yeah.
So you come in and you're fresh. And one of the most frustrating things is when somebody comes in fresh and they're like, hey, I think we're going to do it this way. And I remember on my last deployment to Iraq, we were like, why are you doing it that way? We just got here. The other team has been here. Team 3 was just here, and they've done a great job, and we're following their footsteps. They already have a template they're following. Why are you changing this up? Just curious. And he's like, just to change it up, keep things fresh. And I don't think that's going to work out. And of course, it did not. For myself, when I get into a position, I'm zipping my lip for a good 6 months. Yeah. Just because I want to watch and give everybody the benefit of the doubt. There's a good saying, before you remove a fence post, figure out why it was there. Yeah. So that's my approach with leadership. See what the guys have done before me. I'm going to look at what's going on, ask questions, try to find out a reason. Sometimes there's not a good reason. When the reason is simply, we've always done it this way. All right, let's unpack it, because that's not a good answer.
Yeah.
I remember even a silly thing where how we send scout swimmers across the beach into a danger area. Mm-hmm. We spent years in the global war on terror, refining land warfare tactics, and a lot of these things were repeatable, and we revised them and got so much better in 20 years. And then we were like, you know what? Let's relook at how we are sending out the swimmer scouts and see if we can make it a little bit more streamlined for how we're doing everything else in land warfare. Yeah. And we came back, you know what? The way the old guys have been doing it since the 50s was spot on. But we needed to unpack it. Why? Because the answer was, why are we doing it this way? I don't know, because that's the way we've always done. Let's unpack it and let's try it out. It turns out it was spot on. So I'm glad we didn't reinvent the wheel just to reinvent the wheel. Another thing that one of my guys was like, when we come into this thing called the cigar perimeter, like a loop, what if we box it? Fire team 1 here, 2 here, 3 here, 4 here. They go there every time. Perfect box. You still have 360 security and full accountability of everybody. And the cigar doesn't really look limp, and it'll probably go a lot faster if we just get in 4 cardinal directions. All right, let's try it out. And it was spot on. And I was like, all right, cigar perimeter from the 90s, we're not doing it anymore. We're going to a box. Box perimeter, guys.
Yeah.
Good to go. So sometimes just reevaluating what is the established norm and checking it out. Is it there for a reason? Great. If it is, then let's keep it. If not, let's experiment and see if we can do something better.
Yeah.
I came from a junior guy, and I wasn't like threatened because I'm the LPO and I'm supposed to be making that call. I was like, sounds like a good idea. I'll make the call to try it.
Yeah. Hey, and for people that are listening, a lot of the listeners, they love the military side of things. Even if you look at athletic programs, it's well known if a coach gets fired, now everybody on that staff is probably going to get fired too. And they bring a whole new guy in, and if the ones that didn't get fired, he may be firing them and starting all over from scratch, instead of looking at the program and saying, okay, what has been working for this program that we can maintain, versus they come in and then they just scrap the whole thing. And I've seen teams, the college that I went to school at Mississippi State, they've had a tradition for having really great defense. Well, they've got a new coach to come in. He's focusing only on offense, and defense have just gone to the wayside. And so instead of keeping the things that were good, and then work on the stuff that wasn't. So it happens so many times. I even worked, when I was high school coaching, I was doing that stuff. I worked for an athletic director. He'd been in the same position for 24 years and had a system. We knew it worked. We knew it didn't work. We had a really great staff. We had people that coached other sports within the program as well, were successful in those. Well, that coach decided to retire. The new guy came in and fired everybody. And then they spend the next 4 years on a losing season, and then ended up getting fired in the process. So, yeah, it happens. So you moved up through the ranks. What led you to move from enlisted to a warrant officer? Maybe explain what a warrant officer is, because I don't think I've had anybody on that. And I always loved my warrant officers that I worked for. They were always great because they moved up through the enlisted and they had a different scope.
I'll unpack it in 3 parts. First, the legend of the warrant officer. I'm pretty sure this is true because it sounds so accurate. So way back in the 1600s and the aristocracy days of colonial Britain, you had your aristocracy and your peasant class. Typically, your aristocracy would be your nobility, and they would be your officers, and they're educated and all the things. And then they would conscript their peasants and make them serve underneath them in the British Royal Navy. But every once in a while, you'd have somebody who spent a lot of time on the ship, and they could not only lead the guys and understand what needed to be done, but they could also read, write, and keep the books. And then they warranted a commission in His Majesty's Navy. So now they can eat with the officers and sleep and bunk with the officers. They're not true officers. They're warrants. They're not true nobility. They're not true ring knockers.
Yeah.
But they get to enjoy some benefits because they've proven themselves. In the American military, you could argue that's the whole entire officer and enlisted piece is outdated and antiquated, and we could do something completely different. Most of our enlisted guys have degrees, especially in the SEAL teams.
Yeah.
In the Navy, and become a warrant officer, you have to make at least E7, which is a big deal. In the Marine Corps, when you make E6, that's breaking through the glass ceiling. In the Army, it's making E8, that's breaking through the glass ceiling. And through E7 for us is like, oh, your uniform changes. You're now called chief. You're in part of this chief's mess. Yeah. And you're supposed to be the subject matter expert because you spent all of this time. And you should be grooming the junior officers on what really needs what gets done at the deck plate level.
Yeah.
And so you're respected at that point. And that's in the SEAL teams, that's the pinnacle of your career, is when you're the platoon chief.
Yeah.
This is when you get to wear kit and you're running around with your guys and you're in your fire team and you got your squad over here and you're organizing and telling guys what's next. You're the tactical leader of that element.
Yeah.
But after E7, after the platoon chief mark, after that milestone, you're going to make E8. You're a senior chief. After that, you're not really running and gunning anymore. You're more in charge of management. Usually by the time you're a senior chief, you're a little bit old and more broken. You be the rest. At the E8 and then E9 level, Master Chief, they have become subject matter experts in things that pertain to the entire Navy. So discipline, good order and discipline, ARIs, cleaning the second deck, haircuts and uniforms. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to mark at the guys, hey, your sideburns are too long. All of those things. Like that coach who has to yell at people. I am not that kind of a guy. Yeah. When I looked at the warrant officer route, I was like, they're subject matter experts in things that are specific to the SEAL teams. When there are special programs going on, the officer's got big things to worry about. And you've got the senior enlisted with haircuts, uniforms, cleaning the second deck, and making sure everybody's high and tight and good to go operationally. So they throw these kinds of things at the warrant officers. I was like, that'd be a cool thing to nerd out on some of these programs. I don't mind being the nerd. And I won't have to be yelling about haircuts, uniforms, and blouse boots or other stupid things. I didn't care about it. I don't want to suddenly care about it for my job's sake. And I was really able to dive into some of the special programs that we had, which was cool. When I made the warrant officer list, the senior warrant officer said, Drew, I understand your background is mostly on the regular side of the SEAL teams. I want you to get into our special reconnaissance team and do some of our sensitive activities and be a well-diversified warrant officer. Which is an oxymoron. The SEAL teams do everything differently. So I went over and got to work in our sensitive activities cell and kind of got to gain a new perspective on warfare, not just kicking in doors and blowing things up. But, how do you influence people? What does it look like? Long-term strategies and using more tools, not just guys with kit and guns.
Yeah. On the Army side, I worked in Intel. We had Intel warrant officers that was the description that was given to me, is that they have that higher level authority that is equivalent to maybe what a junior or mid-level officer. They don't have to deviate from the job skill they grew up in. For us, it was MOS. If you grew up in Intel, you get to stay in Intel, versus other officers. They may start off there, but then they get shuffled off to a quartermaster battalion or something along those lines. So that was always, and I always had such respect for my warrant officers because they understood where we were at, and their job always seemed to be more of a teaching type role, just to make sure that we could become the subject matter experts.
Yeah, the officers have to talk strategy and big concepts. The master chiefs need to keep things tight and they put out word. What does the warrant have to say? Nothing. So I'm going to say absolutely nothing. Eventually, when I do have to say something, it should be like, oh, quiet. The warrant officer's talking, and he never talks. So if he's got something to share, it's a pearl of wisdom. One of my friends on my last deployment made warrant 2, and he was yelling about things that the master chief should be yelling about. I was like, bro, if you wanted to yell about those things, you're in the wrong job. Keep quiet and just worry about things that pertain to your specialty, and let the master chief deal with the good order and discipline stuff. That's his realm, not ours anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, we always had for us, it was the sergeant majors and the command sergeant majors that we never could understand why they were so focused on things that, haircuts and whether we were shaved and uniforms and all those things. We never could understand why they were focused on that when there were so many other bigger things in the picture that we needed to be worried about. But that's a really great picture that you painted as far as what those differences are and why they focus on different things.
I can empathize. If you don't trim the grass, then the grass is going to grow. And so who goes out there every week and trims the grass? It's the Master Chief, by putting out word of, hey guys, haircuts, uniforms, all this silly stuff. Somebody's got to remind them. I knew I would be terrible at that. That was not my forte. So I was like, I'll go be the nerd inside the office and geek out on some special programs.
Yeah. So talk to us about, at some point during that 22-year career, you gave your life to God and Jesus. What happened there? Was there something, an event that precipitated that? What are the events around that?
For me, it was purely intellectual. I finished my first deployment to Iraq and came back understanding that I was always taught all religions are the same and it's all good. I didn't really grow up very Christian. I went to Catholic church a couple of times as a kid. At 9 years old, you get your first Holy Confession, you receive your first Holy Communion. I went into the box to do my first Holy Confession. I cried, I beat up my brother, I said cuss words, and I tell lies and all the things. And the priest, at least this is just my experience. The priest was like, it's not that big a deal. Most of these sins aren't that big. And just go to the pew and say 6 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers and everything's forgiven. No. And I was like, I don't know about that. So I went to the pew, I said my 6 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers, and I waved the BS flag. I don't think this makes me right with God.
Yeah.
I was fully indoctrinated in public school with regards to evolution. Millions of years ago in a far away, something small exploded. It created everything. Dinosaurs roamed the earth for millions of years. So I'm kind of an approach where I don't understand this Christianity thing. It doesn't seem to jive with what I'm being taught in science class. Science is supposed to be fact. After going to Iraq, I understand that some religions are different. A friend I met in boot camp, one of my best friends, didn't make it through BUD/S, but remained a good friend. And I came back from the deployment. He was telling me about creation science. And I was like, bro, I aced college anthropology class in my community college in Santa Cruz. So evolution's a fact. And he was like, hey, man, those people that say they're open-minded but never hear your side. And I was like, yeah, I can't stand those people. I need to be one right now. That's fair. That's good. That's fair. So what he did,
it's good to have these friends.
And so I had that awareness. Like I was going to be in that guy. And so he brought over some creation DVDs about a guy that was saying, all right, this is what is said in the evolution narrative. Billions and millions of years ago, a lizard lays an egg and that comes into a chicken. But what's the definition of science? It's something you can observe, test, and repeat. Mm-hmm. I remember that from 6th grade. Do we ever see a lizard giving an egg that bursts the chicken? No, we don't. There's enough time, right? You can say that doesn't make it science. That makes it a belief. You can believe whatever you want, but it doesn't make it science. Yeah. That's the fair point. And then when he pointed out, like, okay, what does it say in the Bible? Every animal will bring forth after its own kind. And then he continued, fossils. What about fossils? Don't they take thousands of years? Here's a fossil created in a week. Observe, test, repeat. We can make fossils all day. Why do we keep believing this evolution narrative? And so by the end of this, I was like, oh my goodness. If Genesis chapter 1 through Genesis chapter 11 could be true, then the rest might be true. Mm-hmm. I better figure this out. I read the Da Vinci Code in 2006. And I was like, I don't know about this Jesus guy. So maybe the Old Testament was good, but I don't know about this Jesus and the New Testament narrative. And my same friend was like, but there's a lot of controversy around that book. Why don't you go to Barnes & Noble and pick up a rebuttal from a Christian author and see what they have to say about it? Mm-hmm. That's fair. I picked up one of the smallest pamphlets I could find there, 60 pages worth. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm an idiot for believing in fiction, not the truth. Now I'm thinking, I'm a Christian. All right, I'm good to go. Yeah. And he finally invites me to church. And I was like, not really into church. And he's like, Christmas play. And I got this extra ticket. My girlfriend can't go. And so I was like, all right, I don't want to waste the ticket. And I'll go to the Christmas play and learn about Jesus, Mary, and Joseph in the manger again. Yeah. And it was all about a girl that needed to be born again. Her life was like a friend helping her. They were like, let's reflect on the day that we were born again. I thought born again meant you grew up in church, went and whored around for a while, and then come back to church and voila, you're born again. I did not know Jesus said to a very religious man that ye must be born again, like all y'all need to be born again. I didn't know that was a Jesus term. On December 18th, 2005, I got saved. Got baptized about a month later. I still got another platoon to do with Team 5. Mm-hmm. And God was good to me. He sent in another Christian guy who was also a surfer, lived around the corner from me, and he had a family. So he had like all the things that I wanted. We got along great, and he was a great mentor. I kept going out and partying, doing all stupid things, but now it felt icky after I became a Christian, but I didn't know what else to do. And he coached me along, like, you don't need to hang out with those dudes anymore. That's not what you're here to do. It started this discipleship journey for me. And he taught me a lot about the Old Testament, and as well as like this narrative about Jesus being a pacifist. Like, that is not how Jesus was at all. And when we look into the details of even Matthew chapter 5, when he talks about turning the other cheek, there's a lot more context. He's not taking it and crying and giving up. You're still standing there. I can't hit you on the right cheek unless I hit you with a left hand open palm slap or a backhand. When you say turn to the left, what's happening? You're asking for a right cross. You're asking to be hit like an equal, like a man. The following verses speak to that. This was Jesus' little version of civil disobedience, even on the Sermon on the Mount, plus all the other things that Jesus does in the rest of the Gospels in front of the Pharisees, as well as when he comes back in Revelation. You're like, oh, that is not sissy Jesus at all. Which is kind of like what many warriors are apprehensive about, because that's what they've been force fed, is Jesus is some like weird little hippie dude who hugs everyone. And meanwhile, the only way to be a tough warrior is you got to get a bunch of tattoos and chew tobacco. So it was great how the Lord showed me there's more to this than the narrative on both sides.
He had no problem going again, kicking over the money changer tables, clearing out the temple and running people out. And he's making enemies real quick because, now the Pharisees are not profiting and making the money that they were off all that. But he had no problem, letting them have it and saying, sticking to the values that he had. So did it ever occur to you as you came back from Iraq, did it ever occur to you that you were in the places where a lot of the events in the Bible were taking place, like Nineveh? Did that ever strike you?
Yeah, many times. Even the fact that Jesus is going to come back and battle a lot of these people. That's a mentality of mine. So yeah, I always thought that was really cool. I wish I got to see more places around in the Middle East. There was one trip out to Jordan that our team was taking, and it was also during the month that my child was born. So they sent me back stateside. So I missed that trip to Jordan. Yeah. There's more important things than going to see, Petra, these other things that are talked about in the Bible, like seeing my firstborn kid. Yeah. I missed some of that, but I went to Oman and I got to see where one of the places where they say is Job's tomb. And it's just cool to be in that area where so much history is at. Yeah.
I would love to be able to have a time where I can go back over, and they actually have these tours where they take you to different places. How did that change your perspective about leadership?
One of the things that he mentioned was this concept, and this mentor of mine, this other senior platoon guy, he picked up a book from John Maxwell, and it was about servant leadership. And he just gave me the wave top of Jesus, master of the universe, came on, put on human flesh, and walked around for 30 plus years and went to the bathroom the same as us, had to eat the same kind of bad food as us, and all of these things. Yeah. And then not only that, but he took a bowl of water and washed his disciples' feet. So here it is, the master of the universe showing as a leader what he is doing for his followers. And he told them to do the same. To me, it was like, okay, as leaders, we are here to serve those under our charge, not those above us. If they put us in charge, then that means they are trusting us to take care of the guys below us. If we have to push back on the leaders who put us in charge, then we have to push back. Because otherwise you can't have two masters. Either you're master of the people that you're working for, or those that you're in charge of. And I'm going to defer to those I'm in charge of every time. Yeah. Sometimes there's a way to split the difference, but we need to keep in mind who we're really working for. The main thing that took away as a servant leader was I need to know my guys, their struggles are, what their individual pain points are, what their different strengths are. Obviously, Peter had some great strengths, but he also had some big weaknesses. And Jesus didn't talk to Peter the same way he talked to Simon. So these are like the kinds of reflections that I had to have as a leadership style of what do I need to do to be the best that I can be. Yeah. As well as when the LPO is a big deal, right? The leading petty officer. When I was first given that position, I had some senior guys like, hey man, you're the pit bull now. You need to make sure that everybody's right time, right place, right uniform. I tried on this pit bull costume for a week. This isn't me. Get people to be at the right place, right time, right uniform without acting like this rabid pit bull. Understanding that I can do me. God made me the way I am. My job is to help, not to yell, and make sure they understand what the expectation is. And so that was one of the big things that set me up for the rest of my career, was reflecting on what does servant leadership look like now that I'm the LPO.
I wished I had that revelation in the service, because I had really great platoon sergeants and squad leaders that taught me. It was the concepts of servant leadership. If you take care of your people, they'll take care of you. And it was simplistic. When I actually picked up a number of years later, picked up that book that you just mentioned with John Maxwell, Servant Leadership, and started reading. I had gotten into this kick. I was reading all of his books, and I was like, wow, that's what I was being taught. It allowed me to evolve a whole lot more. I just wish I had that when I was in the service. It was well after that I got those revelations and put those pieces together. It's great that you were able to implement that in a military context. Did you ever feel like pushback because you had converted over to Christianity, and then you were applying some of these concepts, and there's this perception within the military that not necessarily it's a godless organization, but it's not the most common thing?
Yeah, and of course that's just going to happen, right? Because guys are wondering, can I trust you? I remember one guy saying, like, I quit drinking about 2.5 years after I became a Christian, and he was like, well, you can't trust guys that can't take that filter off. Like, oh, really? Maybe I can't trust you because you do take that filter off. Maybe you're going to say things that shouldn't. Maybe I'll keep my lips tight. And it was giving that shoulder check. That was one of the things I understood. As a Christian, you needed to push back. I didn't want to cast my pearls before swine. There's that proverb of answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. You need to make sure that you put him in his place. But the verse before that is answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou be like unto him. So you're going to look like the clown. I fell for that a couple of times when I was a young Christian. Somebody wanted to say something about the Bible. I'm all about it, and let's do some apologetics and fight it out. And all the other guys in the office put their feet up and start having the popcorn and watch the show. And so I'm being a clown just like him. So I understood that that's not the right approach. When I get questions like, oh, what about turn the other cheek and do nice to your enemies? Yeah. I was like, oh, it sounds like you've really studied this out. So I didn't know you were a Bible scholar. Why don't you tell me more about Deuteronomy chapter 20? What do you think about the rules of engagement there?
No.
I was just saying, you don't really know the Bible? Do you want me to open it up? Oh, okay. Let it go. There's also just this mere thing of, okay, I'm not going to be a big party guy. And that's always a great way to win rapport with your teammates, is being a big partier, right? All right, that's one area I'm going to be low at. So what can I be high in? All the things that matter to a SEAL. Right time, right place, right uniform. Is my gear squared away? Do I understand what's happening? Can I communicate well? Am I in good shape? All of these things I can control. That's what I'm going to do. When we have events, I remember when my wife got married, she's a pastor's daughter, never drank in her life. I was like, babe, when we have a platoon events at the bar, we go there early. We go there on time, right out early. We have a burger, and we're gone within 2 hours, right before things get weird. But at least we showed up, and people remember us being there. And when we pop ninja smoke, most of them don't really care by then anyway. It's an easy way to keep rapport with those I'm working with. Performance says a lot as well. There was one senior chief I had to work with. I was the LPO, and then I made chief. And what they did was they were like, well, next go around, you're going to be the platoon chief. But right now you're what's called the operations chief, and you're going to work for the senior chief and basically be like his right-hand man, his secretary. This guy loved to party, drink, fight, fornicate, the whole deal. And so he did not like me at all. And I was like, you know what? It's all right, because I'm going to try to take the approach of Daniel with Nebuchadnezzar, right? Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar was quite the handful, and Daniel handled him well and won him over by the time Nebuchadnezzar was done with his reign. That senior chief was my biggest fan after we got done working together for 2 years. God can always bless through all of that as long as you have the right approach to deal with those guys. Yeah.
There's so many scenarios that I can think of things that either I witnessed or I experienced along those same lines of people that I got assigned to that, man, we just did not get along right off the bat. But because I was the junior guy, I had to figure out a way to make it work. So the change had to be my approach, not the situation itself.
Yeah, exactly.
So you did your 22 years, learned how to integrate both of these concepts together. So you get to 22 years. It's actually an odd number for somebody to retire at. is most people round off. They either go 20 or they go 25 or so what precipitated the decision to go ahead and transition out?
Part of it, when I made warrant, you can't make warrant any earlier than 14 years. By the time I was pinned, I was at the 15-year mark, and I owed at least 6 for that commission. That was going to bring me to 21. I could re-enlist at 20 and get a bonus for 2 extra years. At the 19 and a half year mark, I'm fighting the vaccine mandate. As a leader, I went around to my entire command and I was like, hey, I know not everybody's here is taking this shot. I will be the senior man of this entire command and I fight all of this for you. I will take all the heavies. If you need somebody to follow, I got this. We had 12 dudes reduced to 4, but true to my word, those 4 guys, even later, they're like, dude, if you didn't actually come and say that, I might have gotten it anyway. Yeah. So I'm glad that they decided to stuck, and that kind of courage was contagious sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So we fought. When the lawsuit happened, I was able to join up, plus 3 of the other guys, 3 out of 4, we all joined up on that lawsuit, which meant we were all protected for that. And right as that lawsuit came in and the judge was like, here's the order, Navy, you need to treat these people as if they're fully vaccinated. It was literally 1 week before I needed to submit my paperwork for a 2-year bonus. I had already prepped it and everything because I was willing to see, like, all right, are they going to reject it? What are they going to do? Yeah. Because of this judge's order, I was able to get this 2-year bonus, and that put me at the 22-year mark. I could start thinking about all my transition. So I knew I was going to have to do at least 21. That was the rub, was what happens if I get kicked out at 19 and a half? What happens if I get kicked out at 20? All right, so I really ideally want to make it to at least 21. Mm-hmm. If I can make it to 22, I get a bonus for living in Hawaii with my family. God worked things out for me. So that's why I retired at 22. And the guys are doing this organization called Beyond the Brotherhood. The 2 other guys on payroll with me are veterans of 22 years. It's a lucky number. Right?
My father-in-law retired with 30. He had a split service, did 7 years. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam, got out, and then finished out the 30. But he had a gap in service before he got in. And I always thought it because the Navy seems to have these a little bit different terms of service, because Army always rounded off. It's either 2 or 4. And then if you extend, it's either 2 or 4. So there always seem to be rounded numbers, even numbers. So it's always interesting to hear the differences in the service, how they end up on some of those numbers as far as their time in. And even just some of the extensions that they get. Yeah, they just tag on an extra year here and there. We don't get those options in the Army. So,
gotcha.
We've reached the hour mark. Round to tell us how you got to where you are now, and share what you want to leave people with.
When I was wondering what's going to happen if I get kicked out with the 19 and a half year mark and get nothing, one of the things I was like, well, I can always try to think about a cash-based business. I got into the hobby of permaculture, gardening at my house. My wife was like, please do not farm the entire yard. She wants grass for the kids to play on. I was like, okay, there. I will bite off some of the perimeter of the property and I'll grow there. So now it's an edible landscaping type piece. And as I pursued learning more about business and how to launch an entrepreneurship type deal, God was so good to me. He linked me up with another big wave surfer, one of my really good friends out here. He already does edible landscaping, but he's not very business minded. He can grow trees, he can grow all these things, and has an existing business with clients and workers. I've agreed to do is come on with him to consult him and make sure that he understands the numbers a little bit better, and that somebody's got a big picture perspective on his operation. Yeah. And I'm also working with Beyond the Brotherhood. So that's a nonprofit. We vet all of the applicants. So it's only for SEALs. Put in an application. I have to do 5 reference checks, 3 subordinates, 1 superior, 1 peer, make sure that they're a good dude. And what we want to do is plug these guys into what we call the rightful place in society. A lot of times people don't understand that in the teams, we do everything. We don't just shoot guns, jump out of airplanes and blow things up. We have to run schedules. We run our own logistics. We hire and fire civilians. We've got budgets to deal with. The Navy cuts us a check and we do everything else. SEALs are doing it all. So with that, guys didn't just, they're great people who chose to go serve instead of succeed in business. Yeah, they did serve. They'll come out with a lot more experience. We want to make sure that these guys get plugged into the right kind of organizations that recognize that expertise and leverage that leadership that they have.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing at Beyond the Brotherhood. We run some fundraising events, and what that allows us to do is bring the other SEALs who have since separated or retired, get us out in the community where we're teaching civilians how to shoot guns, drive, save lives, break out of duct tape, all those kinds of fun things. At the end of the night, it's a bunch of dudes sitting around telling deployment stories and bud stories.
Yeah.
Still maintain that sense of community as well as giving these guys new goals and purpose. So that's one of the other things I'm doing. And I'm speaking at churches when I get invited to go up and preach. And then I'm also working with my wife to do an freelance hair and makeup business out in Hawaii. So there's some people who get married and want some hair and makeup for whether it's their proms or elopements or renewal of vows, all of those kinds of things. So I'm trying to learn all the business things between a startup as well as a nonprofit. And I'm also working with pray.com, with tech startup company, app on your phone, hugely useful for digital discipleship or your daily devotions. And when they have some of their big events, I'll go up there and help LPO those events and make sure that all of their staff, because they got salespeople, they got customer success people, they got scientists. This week, we are here to serve the clients. I need you driving and I'm getting coffee, right place, right time, right uniform for their event. Scattered, probably overcommitted, but that's the way it is. I'm waiting for God to show me where I knuckle down at.
Yeah. I'm still waiting on that too. I've got 5 or 6 irons in the fire. I think it's just part of my personality. I don't think I could knuckle down just to one thing for the rest of my life. I did that getting married, and that's my one knuckle down, and I'll stay committed to that. But everything else, I've always got multiple projects going. So what's your final message that you would like for everybody to walk away with, and then tell everybody how they can get a hold of you?
I would say the biggest thing is servant leadership comes down to empathy. You want to empathize with the other people, even though at first it sounds completely ridiculous. Maybe somebody says something, they've got some crazy theory. Even now as a conspiracy theorist, I've learned, hey, that sounds wild, but tell me why you think that way. Let me understand your perspective. When we understand anybody's perspective, whether it's a coworker or a boss that doesn't seem to think logically, if you can at least empathize and try to hear them out and understand their perspective, then at least you can respect it. You might still fight it.
Yeah.
But if we just say no without understanding where they're coming from, then we're not being a good leader. We're not being a good follower. We're not being good at all.
Yeah.
Where to find me? I'm just really on LinkedIn. Drew Forsberg. That's it. That's all I've got right now. I haven't set up any kind of speaking website. This is all new to me. Edible Landscaping Hawaii should direct you over to my buddy's business, which is growfruithawaii.com. If you're looking to do some edible landscaping in your house, that's growfruithawaii.com. My wife is on Instagram, Ariel's Natural Beauty. So really, I'm just Drew Forsberg at LinkedIn. And then beyondthebrotherhood.org is the organization that helps SEALs and donate or contribute in any way to helping guys find what should be next for them after they finish their time.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your journey, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that you've developed over the years, and the taking everybody through the process. And hopefully it helps other people be able to see that they're in a process as well, and that they can take a better approach to things as they encounter difficulties, and understand that, every transition doesn't necessarily have to have a negative impact. So thank you again, and would love to be able to want to eventually have a big group come on. That would be truly awesome. So thank you again. And we're going to close out, and thank you for listening. Until next time.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Approach. Please hit that button and subscribe for the latest episodes. If you would like to be a guest or with Dr. McAllister to speak at your business or event, you can email him at info@drdavismcallister.com. You can go to his website at